The reason I made it on this long and winding road was because I wasn't scared to try to do something different. And you just have to consistently look for ways in which your skill set applies, and you gotta go for it.
Welcome to Becoming the GC, the podcast that dives deep into the journeys of general counsels and chief legal officers, uncovering the insights and strategies that help define their success. Hosted by Joe Schul, founder of Inside Counsel Academy. We share real-life stories and practical advice from successful GCs, guiding you on your journey to the top. Tune in and discover what it takes to become the exceptional legal leader your organization needs.
This is Joe Schul. We spoke today with Chuck Kable, and here is what you're going to hear in this interview. You'll discover how Chuck's unconventional path from economics and debate to litigation and ultimately multiple GC roles shaped his approach to leadership. You'll learn how law departments are embracing technology and AI with real-world examples of tools transforming efficiency and strategy. And you'll hear Chuck's candid insights on personal growth, overcoming imposter syndrome, and the essential people skills every aspiring GC should develop. Stay with me to the end, and I'll share my biggest takeaways. Here's Chuck's bio. As the Chief Legal Officer, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at Innovative Renal Care, Chuck oversees all legal affairs for the fourth largest dialysis operator in the U.S. With 25 years of legal experience, he has a proven track record of successfully guiding companies through major transformations, driving impressive growth, and navigating complex regulatory environments, especially in the healthcare and health tech sectors. Chuck is passionate about transforming and modernizing corporate legal service delivery. You're going to hear more about that. And he focuses on a metrics-driven approach to legal that demonstrably leads to increased efficiency, profitability, and customer satisfaction. So with that, let's get into the interview. Hey, Chuck, how are you today?
Good, Joe. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm doing well, thank you. Today, we're going to take a little journey on your career path and talk about your path to becoming a GC, but I'm going to go back further in time and ask you what inspired you to pursue a career in law to begin with.
Wow, that is such an interesting question. I mean, I think that when I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think that, my stepdad was the one that actually kind of said to me, well, look, how'd you do in, debate class? I'm like, I did okay, and he's like, well, that's a potential option for you. But I was studying economics at the time, and I really enjoyed, kind of the thought process that you engage in terms of solving some of those model-based problems. And that was kind of my first exposure to, the kind of the economic side of law, right? So I got some exposure to Judge Posner, who was a very kind of opportunity cost, who should bear the cost kind of judge.
As an undergrad, you did.
Well,
Wow.
there were some interesting courses we took, right?
Yeah.
That kind of gave us exposure here and there. But at the end of it, it seemed like a viable career path for me. And I just kind of took a chance, thought I could be good at it. I think I'm okay at it, but it worked out.
Were you in the Big Ten? You went to a Big Ten school?
Yeah, I'm a Michigan State guy.
Okay.
So I was at Michigan State undergrad.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And so when did you go straight through to law school?
It did. Which, I mean, it's tough when you're that young to make a decision about what you're going to do for the rest of your life, But I think in the moment, you just kind of go where your heart and your head leads you. And I think for me, once I was in law school and you're kind of telling yourself, okay, this is serious, this really matters. I think the rest kind of took care of itself. I mean, I really enjoyed that experience.
Well, they probably still say it today, but certainly when we were going to law school, it was like, this does not mean you're committed to being a lawyer. It opens as many options as forces you to choose. But yet here we are, still lawyers.
Right. Doomed forever. That's right.
So when did you first think you wanted to be a general counsel?
Okay. So I started out actually as a litigation attorney, and I worked in Metro Detroit, and very competitive spot to be. I was a theater kid too, when I was in high school and stuff. So I really enjoyed going to court. It was fun. But I think that as I became kind of skilled at breaking down witnesses and depositions and, identifying inconsistencies in stories, I was an insurance defense guy. So I spent a lot of time deposing people about,
Okay.
claims they were making. And, it becomes less rewarding over time and you don't feel like you're doing good even though you're representing your client. And so I began thinking fairly quickly, within the first probably 3 years of my litigation career that, what, this is not what I want for the rest of my life. And so I didn't do anything kind of immediately. I just knew that I wanted, more or something different. More is probably the wrong word, but I just wanted something different. And I just kept my eyes and ears open. I ended up moving in-house to it was still a litigation department for State Farm. And from there, I made a jump into a startup that focused on healthcare subrogation, which was still litigation adjacent. But that was the first job that gave me exposure to hiring attorneys, training them, managing performance, all while kind of, doing the day job on top of it. And I worked with a gentleman there who was the founder he was the CEO and the GC because he was an attorney that founded the business. And watching him kind of wear the hat of the GC was exciting to me. And, from that point kind of became a career goal for me.
So he was a mentor as well as your boss, but a mentor in the GC role, would you say?
I wouldn't call him a mentor. I think that he was very sharp, very smart, and I was lucky enough to be in the room on occasion when he was exercising his GC muscles.
Mm-hmm.
I did not really feel like it was a mentor-mentee relationship. I think that, I had had a mentor on the litigation side. I think by and large on my journey through this GC world, the mentors I have had have been operators and not lawyers.
Hmm.
Um,
More.
which has been different, but, primarily driven by the fact that, a lot of the businesses I've worked for, I've been either one of very few or the only GC. So I've been a solo GC. I've run teams. And when you're a solo, you don't have anybody to kind of bounce ideas off of other than maybe your boss. And so I did get lucky in a number of positions and have developed one mentor in particular that I still keep very close touch with and has had strong influence on me in my career. So
Tell me about your first GC role. How did that come about?
so fun. So I was in Michigan at the time. I was working at the subrogation startup right around the time of the financial crisis, so 2008. And Michigan was not a good place to be during that time. And I had a job, I was secure in that job, but I did not feel like I had opportunity to move up in that role. And so I had been looking for a new job for 8 months inside the state of Michigan. And then in August of 2008, I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, is it okay if I maybe look outside the state just to see? She said, sure. So that was in August. And by November 1st, we had relocated to the Woodlands, Texas. And I was starting my first day on the job as general counsel for Carton Healthcare Network, which is a rev cycle business here in the Woodlands.
That was fast.
That was fast. Yeah. Yeah. Texas had a resilient economy. They went through their own challenges. And so I think it still affected everybody, but I think it was less so in certain states. And I think Texas was one of those states that didn't have as much of an impact and was still kind of a really good economic environment.
Have you been there ever since in the Woodlands?
I have.
Okay. Yep. But multiple GC jobs along the way.
Yep. Multiple GC gigs. Yep.
Tell us about that progression.
I've been kind of lucky to hang in one place. So we worked at Carton for, I don't know, 6 years. I should look at my own LinkedIn profile because I don't remember how long I've worked at places in the past. Was a Carton. So we went through private equity transaction there. I worked with a number of great CEOs through my experience there. And then eventually I got recruited away to another business located in the Woodlands called Ameris Holdings. Originally they started out as like a freestanding emergency department business, but the founders were all emergency physicians, sharp guys, made a decision to transition the model into more of a community, like neighborhood hospital footprint. So they were the first movers in what's called the micro hospital space, which is a fully licensed hospital with inpatient, bays, outpatient, emergency department, but it's a much smaller footprint.
Mm.
And those were typically joint venture relationships for what it's worth. And anyway, those guys recruited me away to be I think I was their first GC. And so stayed there for 5 years, I think. And then,
Who was the CEO during that time?
so there was a doctor named Toby Hamilton. This is where our paths almost cross, I think. Or this is when I start floating in your kind of rotation, or your kind of world. So Toby Hamilton was the founder, was the original CEO of the business. And then he made a decision to step away, stayed on the board of directors, but then a guy named Craig Gogan took over.
Right.
And Craig was came from the dialysis side of the business. He had worked for DaVita, right, which is, of course, where you were. He worked for, I think most recently he was at DSI Renal. I think he had done a deal with those guys before he eventually made his way to Ameris. So I got to work with Craig for.
He and I did not overlap at DaVita, but I've heard about him, my whole career. He's sort of legend, went off and had a lot of success. Yeah, but we missed each other at DaVita by a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. But he was a good guy. I think that, transitions like that, CEO moving out, new CEO coming in, they're not easy for anybody. And for a GC in particular, right? I think you have to make sure you have a firm foundation, and it can take time, and it's different with every personality that you deal with, which is why I always valued my litigation experience, incidentally, right? I think that one of the things you learn through that world is how to read people, how to work with people, how to communicate effectively, depending on style. And I think that helps a ton. You're not giving up your own sense of self or your own integrity if you have to adjust style based on who you're working with. And I think that, that skill set really has been probably one of the most beneficial things throughout my career. It's less about, as my team right now, I do not know a lot, but I know people, and I know how to, get them to talk and essentially provide me with, exactly what it is they're looking for. And that's always really useful, I think, whether people are, pissed at you, or, whether they're looking for answers, sometimes both.
Right on. Tell me about innovative renal care.
So this is it's a dialysis business, right? And so this just goes to show you, like, connections really do matter. And so I met a guy named George Atmore, he was the chief financial officer, one of several that came through Ameris. And so I met George, at Ameris, had a really good working relationship, which I think GCs have to have good working relationships with CFOs, like you have to. And he was great. I had really good experience with him. I ended up moving on to a different role, and George kind of stayed at Ameris for, I don't remember how long after, I left, that he made a decision to move to a different role, but he moved to a different role, and that was with IRC. And so flash forward several years, the departing GC, or their GC, was about to depart, essentially. He was looking to do something different. And George gave me a call out of the blue and said, "Hey, listen, are you interested?" I said, "Sure." And so George connected me with the right folks at IRC, and met everybody, and it was a really good team. And it's good to be back in, what I call kind of soup to nuts healthcare. I think I was in an occupational health business before, which is a little bit different, but there's nothing like healthcare people. I think they're compassionate, empathetic, they care about each other. You can kind of feel the cultural environment, which is what I feel at IRC. So,
yeah, great. How you've been a GC in various roles over a period of time.
Yeah.
How is the role different than, how's it evolved, or is it pretty much the same?
I think it's evolved. Obviously when you're a solo versus managing a team, there's different stuff you're going to wake up and do every day. I think that, you kind of have to be in the weeds. You have to be tactical. And you have to kind of back out of that and be strategic when you're the solo, and understand where your kind of gaps are and all that good stuff. That doesn't really change for a larger business, other than now you've got a team that are kind of running traps on a lot of the day-to-day tactical stuff. But I also need them to elevate to help me understand strategic issues and risk as we move forward. But I think certainly the way I've evolved, and it feels like this is the way the industry is kind of moving, there is a much more defined focus around the operational aspects of a legal department. The way in which you're tracking the stuff that you're doing, how you're reporting on, the way you're tracking it, how you're addressing efficiency. Are you tracking hours? Are you tracking projects completed per person per, week or month or whatever? So definitely this kind of legal operations movement that has been growing for quite some time, it certainly has affected me. And I think that, I've also, because of the fact that I worked for some smaller businesses, I've worn multiple hats. So I've run compliance teams, I've run human resources, I've run talent acquisition. And so those experiences, it's a kind of hard and fast education around how to understand metrics. And I really enjoyed the way you can use metrics in those kind of functions. And I always thought there's a way to kind of do this in legal. You just have to
Right.
focus on the right stuff and
Right.
measure.
Whereas, a lot of legal departments, lawyers think, well, that doesn't apply to us.
Yeah.
There's no way to,
Yeah.
even though it applies to everything else.
I know. It's like, you want to take the kind of, it's the same concept as like the financial reporting you get out of the finance team, right? It's like they've got this regular cadence reporting with key measures. They're talking about, variability and why there's differences. Legal can do that. It's different. And the practical reality is not everybody cares. But in terms of the overall financial performance of the business, cash flow, effective utilization of company resources, this stuff matters.
Right. I wonder if it's because we're trained to question everything. And so as soon as we're like nervous about putting metrics forward, because that's not the whole story. And, but everybody knows that with metrics, it's the start. It's a starting point to have a conversation about how things are going directionally.
Totally agree with that.
And LPL.
I totally agree with that. And that was the way, it took a lot of time to get my team comfortable with this whole concept. I remember walking in, and I've been at IRC for a year and a half now, right? So I've got a team of 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I've got 6 underneath me. Not all lawyers. I've got paralegals, attorneys, and I have a legal ops kind of coordinator. But talking to them when I first arrived, and I was talking about service delivery, throughput, and they're showing me their, lists on legal pads and their Excel spreadsheets. I'm like, no, this is not what I'm talking about. We need a system. We have to start to track things. And I was always super clear. We're drawing a line in the sand, right? We're just going to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if we're wrong, we'll adjust, right? I'm not going to punish you because we were wrong, on what we thought our goal was going to be, for whatever the particular measure was, turnaround time on commercial contracts, for example.
Yeah.
There's so much variability in these things. So I want to focus on the things we can control. I want to establish a standard today and then look back and see if we're right or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've come a long way in a year and a half. The team is pretty jazzed up. We've got some technology now that I'm excited about.
What do you use tech?
So I really I'm very cost conscious, as a lot of us are. And I use a matter management tool called Zakia, spelled Xakia. This is a group out of Australia. And I've worked with them since 2021, I think, which I think is when they actually started selling in North America. It's super cost effective. The implementation is so easy. And I was the initial administrator. This is at a different job when I brought it in. And I learned how to use it. I learned how to get value out of it. And it showed me dashboards, reports. It has some document automation functioning, like for things like NDAs. So I brought that in kind of immediately to IRC and had the team start working with it. And they were very patient with me, and I really appreciated that, but I kept at them. I'm like, come on, we got this. Keep using it. Keep trying. And so now I think we're at a point where folks, they know where their knowledge gaps exist. And so we're doing things to address knowledge gaps in terms of how to use the system. And then what I'm really excited about is it comes with a legal front door, like a portal where people can kind of log in and submit stuff. And I don't think, it doesn't make sense to me to insist on 100% portal stuff. I think there's going to be like onesie twosies that don't make sense, but our goal is 80% portal usage. and so we've come a really long way. We just had I had an in-person offsite strategy session with my lawyers last week, where we have our initial set of service levels that we're going to communicate to the business, and then I do it all day in person with my full team. We're going to do that in October, and I'm going to announce it, and we're going to launch it and just go. So that tool's been great, and then I am on the AI bandwagon, happy or unhappy to say, but I'm using a tool called Legora,
What's it?
which it's called Legora.
Okay. With it out?
Legora. There's a lot of publicity right now around law firms purchasing the tool,
Yeah.
but I am getting so much value out of it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I've demoed GCAI, which I think is also a fabulous tool.
Yep.
When I demoed GCAI, it didn't quite yet have the functionality that I saw in Legora. And so I made a decision based on what I saw at the time. Legora, this is a group of guys out of, I think they're in Sweden.
What did
Actually.
it have? What did it have that you felt was lacking in GCAI at the time?
So GCAI at the time had not yet completed their word add-in, where you could have it
Yeah.
do
Right.
that like word.
Totally.
And Legora has a feature called tabular review,
Uh-huh.
where I can analyze, a bulk set of documents. So I can drop, I think the number they told me was up to 100,000, which is, I'm never going to do that. But just the example I can give you is, so, we needed a resource that helped us understand what were the HVAC repair responsibilities and other, landlord versus tenant repair responsibilities under 300 leases. Okay.
Right.
I was able to generate, a spreadsheet through tabular review that had all that information with references, so I could cross-check it to the exact documents and confirm whether or not it was accurate. And it's so accurate. And it took me 10 minutes to generate the output.
What a game changer.
I mean, it is. And so now the trick now is, how do you make that part of your day to day?
Yeah.
And how do you start to change the way you do things to really leverage it? Right. And so, one of the things that we're just doing internally is we're asking paralegals to kind of triage using the tool and potentially help generate, a discussion draft red line that can then go to the attorney for, comment. And so it should accelerate. So the hypothesis is it's going to accelerate speed, and it will enhance capacity in the sense that paralegals will be able to handle more than they would have otherwise over time. I think it's going to there's a ramp there to kind of figure it out. But that's the hypothesis, and I think we're going to get there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, but those two have been great. And then there's all the others, right? There's DocuSign. We use Contract Safe right now for contract repository. That's just a cost-effective option. I feel like there's so much happening on that side. I'm really not inclined to make a change yet, because there are so many new entrants into the legal tech space, in terms of that stuff. So
yeah, fascinating. Another one that I found good is Spellbook.
Yeah,
It's
Spellbook. I talked to those
good
guys.
at Redline.
Talk to those guys. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think for me, it's like, I want a tool that's not just that. I want to get kind of I want some force multipliers, not just the redlining.
Right. Yeah. If you could combine GCAI and Spellbook, which I think GCAI is trying to do, and probably Spellbook will back into the, more general search capability as well. But it's all, I think it's going to be important for lawyers to embrace that. When I think about hiring people in the future, it's going to be an important skill that they have is, just like you wouldn't have hired somebody back in the day who didn't know how to use Westlaw. So, all right, let's go back to the human side. So, what are you personally good at now that you weren't always good at and had to develop?
I mean, I think just being comfortable being uncomfortable. When you work in a law firm, you have to be right. And there's a lot of work that goes into making sure you're right, or at least that your position is fully supported. But it's like, I joke around, it's like in law school, they gave you the fact pattern, and that is actually the hardest part is getting the fact pattern right. So in litigation,
Right.
said,
Yeah.
you spend all this time in litigation developing the fact pattern, right? And I think when you're in a GC seat, it's even harder to get good, complete information. And so you have to be willing to make decisions in the face of immense uncertainty. And I think that that is you get put in a role and you have to perform, and that's how you perform. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But you have to move on from that if you are wrong. But I think that in most instances that I've been involved in where I've got incomplete information, you ask the questions you need to ask, and then you talk to the team about the risk, and if the risk is acceptable, then go. But I think that's kind of I guess it's a wishy-washy answer, but that's to me, that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned how to do is
Yeah.
incomplete information. Okay, here's what I think.
Yeah. And from experience, facing situations that seemed insurmountable and then seeing how everything works out
Yeah,
over time, you start to grow in confidence because you can say rightly, like, this is a problem.
yeah,
We've had bigger problems and we figure them out. So we'll figure this one out.
yeah. What's interesting to me, like personally, to me, no matter how many of those events you kind of go through, I still have issues with my own perception where I'm like, am I good enough? Do I know what I'm doing? That imposter syndrome, I feel it all the time. And when you're in the moment, it's never there, right? I think when you're called upon to be that rational, reasoning, calm force, I don't feel it then. It's always in those quiet moments before or after where you're like, I
I
feel
think
like
it's great. Yeah. I think it's a great point because people call it imposter syndrome.
yeah,
It's just part of being human. Like maybe there are some people who don't have it, but most of us do.
yeah. Yeah. If you're in any kind of a role where you've got to, be involved in decision making or you just think you second guess yourself, but you're right. I think that's why it's also important to have a moment of self-reflection periodically. That's very helpful for me is to just think back on all the things that, you've been a part of, that you've accomplished, the challenges, right? The things that didn't go well, the things that did go well. And I think it gives you that strength.
Right on. I mean, I personally keep a list and I recommend, to my coaching clients that, especially like if they're earlier in their career, now's the time to keep track of all the successes that you've had, right? So that
Uh,
facing something new, you can look at it. That
yeah.
builds confidence. Like, I don't think it's a matter of people say, like, well, how do I develop confidence? Well, you develop confidence from facing situations and then successfully resolving them. It's not something you just like flip a switch and now I'm confident I wasn't confident before. Comes from experience, comes from positive experience.
Right. And that's where
Takes
it
time.
is. Totally. And
But
that's
you've got to track that so you can remind yourself of those things.
yeah, no, that's such a great point. That is such a great point. Yes,
So, what do you still want to get better at?
everything. I mean, I think IRC is a much larger business than typically the business I've worked for, right? And so I think that the skill set is the same, but there is less direct involvement and engagement. And that it makes me feel like I don't know what's happening. And so to me, it's understanding, what are the kinds of updates I want? What are the kinds of updates I need?
Mm,
It's that balance, I think, of and then also some stuff I don't need to know about. I don't care.
mhm, mhm.
Trust you. You guys go handle this. And if you need me for something, let me know. So that I feel like I'm pretty good generally on that stuff, but there's always a worry, right? That like there's things that I need to be doing that I'm not, that are just blind spots. And as the businesses get larger, I feel like that worry becomes a little bit more acute, you know?
And you operate, I think, in a virtual environment in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
and that makes it more. You have to be more intentional then about things.
you do. And what I would say, I mean, there's a lot to be said about intentionality and engaging with, fellow teammates. I think that this kind of transition to remote, I don't like it. I've done it for a long time,
Yep.
but I'm not. I'm not keen on it. I think that it seems like there's much more kind of outsourcing of decision making happening these days, where we're going to have a meeting, or we're going to have an email, and then you're forwarding the email that, you're bringing in more people. So then you have this phenomenon, you got too many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody has a voice, but no one wants to make a decision. There's confusion. I think some of that is because of this virtual environment. And so I think your comment on being intentional is spot on. I mean, you have to be very intentional about how you engage. And that is probably like the way that I manage meetings. I think I really want to do better. I really want to do better at that. I think that, I'm a poor planner. So I need to be able to plan. Like if I'm going to have these meetings, I want to plan it. What am I going to talk about? Why am I going to say that? Is this something I could just send in an email? Like, why are we having a meeting in the first place? That kind of analysis is helpful to me. And then I'm, reading some books about different things I can do to help focus some of these discussions. A lot of times they are very helpful. Like I've got standing meetings that I handle. Got huddles for lawyers, huddles for support team, and then we have a monthly kind of check in. By and large, they're pretty good, but they could be, I think, a lot better and more effective. So that's definitely something I think.
Anything you're reading that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So I've got one right here. So this is called No Fail Meetings.
Oh, yeah. That's
And
by Michael Hyatt.
yeah, Michael Hyatt.
He used to be a coach of mine.
Did he
Michael.
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
great.
I used to go to Nashville once a quarter.
That's so great.
Paid for it myself. Nobody, at my employer even knew I was doing it.
Oh,
Which
good for you.
encourage people, like it does, you don't need to go through, you don't need to have somebody pay for these things.
Yeah.
It'll pay off for you in the long run.
No, that's so great.
Oh.
I use the full focus planner.
Oh, same. Yeah. Got mine right here.
I'm pretty inconsistent with it, but I do use it. Yeah. I got mine right here. I'm reading Free to Focus right now. That's a great one. But the other book I'm reading is called Traction, and that's the entrepreneur operating system book. So it's not every bit of it is directly applicable to departmental operation, but there are some really good nuggets I'm getting out of that as well.
Yeah, great.
So I had to think about how to simplify things a little bit,
Yeah. I was going to ask you how you what do you do to stay, sort of sharp and continue growing as a professional and as a leader? Sounds like you like to read and
I try. I try to spend time, reading and usually my colleagues are really good sounding boards for ideas too. I mean, I'm a pretty big proponent of strategizing unique and different ways of doing things. That keeps me sharp too, right? Just by kind of testing the limits or, the bounds of, this is how we've always done it, which may sound crazy for a GC, but that's just how I'm wired, But no, I do try to read just to help myself because there's always that. I feel like I'm on like I got to keep running. I got to keep running. Technology is another big focus of mine is understanding how AI is developing and how we can use it and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you manage so many competing like inputs on your time, demands for your time to make sure you're doing not only reacting, but also making sure you're being proactive?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, this concept of it's like the Eisenhower matrix, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's really kind of how I think about it. And then what I try to do when you take a step back is identify patterns. And so like, okay, so can this be automated? Can this be, consistently delegated?
In the Eisenhower matrix for people watching or listening is, what a lot of people think of like is Franklin Covey, the Covey model, which is like urgent, mapping urgent and important.
Right.
And trying to make sure we're spending enough time in the important, but not urgent. Somebody's not asking for it, but it will soon become important and urgent if you don't get out in front of it and be proactive.
Yeah, and then on top of that is delegate. Well, I kind of there's Eisenhower matrix and there's delegate, automate, eliminate, right? Which also comes out of this Traction book, which that kind of resonates with me because it rhymes. But that's how I try to think about everything. And then I want my team to develop.
What's the third one? So it's delegate, automate,
eliminate.
Eliminate. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
We forget about that.
Don't bother me with this again.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's knowing when to say no too, right? Like which is essentially what all this stuff is about. It's just, prioritizing, yourself and your schedule with the right, stuff, right? Highest and best use is the goal. Finding it and getting there, I think, is a challenge. But I'm very quick to tell. Like, I'll ask people, "Why do you want me on this? What are we talking about?"
Mhm.
Because I'll get included on everything.
Mhm.
And I already have typically 2 days a week are filled, with meetings.
Yep.
And that, for some reason lately, my Thursdays and Fridays have been like really good. So I'd love to keep that.
Don't tell anyone.
I know, right? Yeah, let's not publish this. So, anyway,
That's great. Okay, good. So if you could give a piece of advice to a younger Chuck Kable
yeah,
who's looking to become a GC, what would you tell him?
take a chance. I think that the reason I made it on this long and winding road was because I wasn't scared to try to do something different. And you just have to consistently look for ways in which your skill set applies, and you gotta go for it. It's making those connections, in your mind about how you could do this. It's organization, it's, critical thinking. And then if you have some subject matter expertise on top of it, that's what's gonna get you in the door, you know? And then but it's personality and knowing people, I think, too. I just threw it like 10,000 things at myself. But yeah, take a chance and then really focus on developing those people skills and understanding people and how to communicate. I think that probably takes you the longest way, mostly because people have a very regimented view of what a lawyer is. And I rarely am told that, you know what, you seem like a lawyer. I have a different approach because I want people to open up to me because
Yeah.
that's what has to happen when you're in house.
Yeah. What do you like to do when you're not lawyering, being a GC?
Well, I'm a busy dad. So I've got 5 children. My first is in college, and then the rest of them are crazy sport fanatics. So I've got water polo players, I've competitive volleyball players.
Wow.
So I spend a lot of time
We're busy. Yeah.
supporting my kids. We are a family that values experiences, and so when we've got the time, we really enjoy going to Disney World as a family. We're one of those Disney freaks, families that
Are you? Yeah.
yeah, we just enjoy it. We've got enough. We're familiar with it, and it's low stress for us, and so we really enjoy that time together.
What are you most looking forward to?
Tomorrow, just kidding. I think there's a couple different answers to that question, but if I focus on work, I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can use AI to help drive that highest and best use, in terms of everything that we do. More so, I'm just generally excited about the future. I think that staying positive, I think, is important to me. And it's easy. And I'm a news fanatic too, on top of it all. And so it's really easy to kind of read the news and be like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's horrible.
Right.
But I try to remember
I
that.
sometimes fall into that. Yeah.
But then you look around and, we're all part of communities wherever we live, and we're good people and we care about each other. And we go to football games, we support our kids, we care about, what happens. And I think that gives me hope and gives me some positivity to be happy about the future. But
I can't think of a better way to end our talk than right there. Thank you, Chuck.
yeah,
Really appreciate your coming on.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed our time with Chuck. I know I did. A few key things I'll take from this episode are: number one, take the leap. Chuck's journey proves that bold moves and embracing the unknown can lead to extraordinary opportunities. Number two, don't just keep up, get ahead. From AI to legal ops, Chuck shows how innovation isn't optional, it's essential. And third, remember, it's not just about the law. It's about people, growth, and having the courage to bet on yourself. Okay, until next time, this is Joe Scholl. For more tips on accelerating your path to becoming a world-class general counsel, subscribe to my newsletter at InsideCounselAcademy.com and connect with me directly on LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in. Now go make your own impact.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Becoming the GC. Whether you're preparing for the GC role or looking to sharpen your skills as a sitting general counsel, We hope this episode offered valuable insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Explore more resources and join our community at InsideCounselAcademy.com. Please tune in next time for more insights and inspiring stories from successful legal leaders.